After almost 10 years, the families of those who died in the Life Esidimeni tragedy might finally see justice. The National Prosecuting Authority has received the legal opinion recommending the prosecution of former Gauteng Health MEC Qedani Mahlangu and former Director of Mental Health in Gauteng, Dr. Makgabo Manamela, for the deaths of 2 mental health care patients in the Life Esidimeni tragedy. Now, in 2016, at least 144 mental health care patients died when the termination of the Gauteng Department of Health's contract with long-term psychiatric care hospital Life Esidimeni resulted in more than 1,400 patients being moved to ill-equipped and unlicensed non-governmental organizations. For more on this matter, we are now joined by an activist and Section 27 co-founder, Mark Heywood. Mark, it is always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much for being here on the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So, I mean, years of delays in the decision to prosecute those responsible for the deaths of 144 mental health care users. Let's get your immediate reaction to this development. We're talking about legal opinion that says that there can be, I suppose, maybe prosecution for 2 of those deaths.
Leanne, I think I have mixed feelings, and the families have mixed feelings about this decision. On the one hand, it is a very big and very significant step forward that the NPA is almost at the point of making a decision to prosecute Qedani Mahlangu, the former MEC, and Makgabo Manamela for culpable homicide. And that is very significant, and it is very serious, and it meets the feeling for justice of the families who want to see people criminally prosecuted and in jail for the deaths of their loved ones. On the other hand, as you've said, I was at a meeting on Monday with all of the families when the NPA briefed the families and gave them an update on this. And the families had many questions. They asked why, when 144 people died, starved to death, died without medicines, died without getting the medicines they needed to control schizophrenia, to control other illnesses, each one a painful death. Why, when 144 people died, are only 2 deaths being used as the basis for culpable homicide? And again, after 10 years, there's a lot of mistrust. The families also wanted to know, well, if you have this legal opinion from a senior counsel that says that you can and should prosecute for culpable homicide, why must they wait for several more months for the NPA to make a final decision on the prosecution? So those are mixed feelings. I must say I'm happy on the one level. On another level, I feel deeply tortured and dissatisfied, as do the families.
And I don't blame you. I really don't blame you, because perhaps maybe you can give us a little bit of an understanding, because the inquest found 9 deaths prima facie linked to neglect conducted by Mahlangu and Manamela. It's now gone down to 2. What happened? I mean, what was the reasoning behind this?
So let's reverse a little bit, go back. First of all, we had the arbitration, which was, if you remember, was led by Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke. Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke had very, very strong words in relation to all 144 deaths. But the purpose of that arbitration wasn't to decide criminal liability. Then the arbitration led to an inquest, which took place over more than a year. And what happened, Leanne, at the inquest is that Section 27, who is representing all of the Life Esidimeni families, felt that in order to have the best chance at the inquest of showing the causality between the deaths and the relocation of patients from Life Esidimeni to these NGOs that had no skill, no food, no medicine, no expertise, that they should pick 9 cases, which are very, very strong cases. Because unfortunately, it seems like the NPA and the police haven't really done their work. You would think that there's a huge body of evidence that can be used now by criminal prosecutors. And there is a lot of evidence, but the NPA says there's not enough evidence. And then the inquest found that Qedani Mahlangu and Makgabo Manamela could be considered criminally negligent in relation to those deaths, and then referred it to the NPA.
Yeah.
The NPA has done further analysis, further investigation. They've given all of the evidence that they have, the inquest findings, to the senior counsel, and the senior counsel has said, well, in 2 deaths, the deaths of Virginia Makapela and Terence Chabe, we recommend that you can prosecute because you can meet the causality requirements. It's legal technicalities,
Yes.
but prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was the closure of Life Esidimeni that led to the loss of life.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, Leanne, is, if eventually, if Qedani Mahlangu is arrested and prosecuted and eventually found guilty for 2 deaths, then what will be justice is that we will all know that those 2 deaths represent the lives of all 144 people who died in the course of this tragedy.
Yeah.
So the moral responsibility is absolutely clear, even if the criminal liability has now been narrowed down to just 2 people.
And that is a very hard statement, I imagine, for the rest of the families to hear. It really must be. I mean, just to give people and viewers a little bit more on these 2 lives we're talking about. We're talking, the references, the patient's Virginia Makapela. Reports say, just to detail what she went through: emaciation, dehydration, gangrene, and placement at Precious Angels despite unsuitability. Then there was Terence Chaba, and again, same thing, bronchial pneumonia as part of neglect. These are just 2 cases. There are 144 cases, and yet, as you say, they could eventually be a symbol of everybody else that was lost to this tragedy. Mark, let me ask you before we go on, it's a question that's plaguing me. Has everyone been found? There were 144, and at one point they were still missing 44 patients. They could not be traced. Have all of the patients been identified?
Leanne, to the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
I'm not working at Section 27 any longer, and Section 27 lawyers are still really paying very close attention to this. But I don't believe that there are people missing.
Yeah.
But one other thing I would say that we have to remember, we talk about the deaths that occurred, the 144 deaths, but there were also a lot of people who suffered severe harm, didn't die, but they were traumatized, they were denied access to their medicines. So, the harm is even greater than what we are discussing.
Yeah, and that's the raw facts, and that's the recommendation. Will the recommendation that only 2 of the deaths warranted prosecution make a difference? I mean, will this perhaps lead to more? Is it a start?
Well, at the briefing by the National Prosecuting Authority with the families, that question was asked, and the acting director of public prosecutions in Gauteng, Marika van Vuren, answered by saying that a new team of prosecutors are now looking at the evidence after the senior counsel's opinion, and that it is possible that they may decide to bring in more deaths, so to charge culpable homicide for more than just 2 people. That is part of the analysis that they have to make, and certainly, the families feel that there is strong evidence that there was a gentleman at the meeting called Lucas. His brother died, and he talked about how he would visit his brother every week, and he knew and could give evidence as to the state of health of his brother until he was moved, and then died after being moved. So we think that there is plenty of evidence in relation to other deaths to cross the threshold of proving that the cause of their deaths beyond reasonable doubt was the negligence, the criminal negligence of those responsible for their care.
Yeah. Well, what about political accountability? Because at the end of the day, that is also something that needs to be held accountable to. So we talk about political accountability and not only professional discipline. How do we do this?
Yeah, a good point. Well, all of the politicians who sat in office when this happened are still in office today. Life Esidimeni is another catastrophe that we have brushed under the carpet in many respects. Makgabo Manamela, who's not a politician, but is a nurse, has still not been disciplined by the South African Nursing Council. Dr. Barney Celebano, who was head of health in Gauteng, has still not faced a disciplinary action by the Health Professions Council of South Africa. The NGOs that were set up to receive patients but completely ill-equipped or totally unequipped to receive them, as far as I know, still sit with the proceeds, the monies that they were given by the Gauteng Health Department. There is so much, Leanne, that we still don't know. I mean, at the heart of this, in my personal belief, was a corrupt scheme within the Gauteng government, and we know the Gauteng Health Department is very corrupt. But there hasn't been a serious police investigation, Hawks investigation, to uncover exactly what the motive was for taking 144 people out of a healthcare facility where they were stable and living well with mental illnesses and taking them and dumping them into NGOs where they died of starvation, of torture, of denial of medicine, and so on. All of us, the families, Section 27, those of us who continue to advocate around Life Esidimeni, seek full truth and full justice on this, because those patients deserve it, and because the country needs it.
Yeah, indeed. And Mark, let's just quickly look at the Moseneke orders, because this happened a while ago, the Moseneke orders, and some of the things were, of course, the damages, a memorial, counselling, a recovery plan. What remains undone now in 2025?
To the best of my knowledge, there is no serious recovery plan. To the best of my knowledge, mental health care services in Gauteng and across the country remain underfunded. Just a few weeks ago, the health ombudsperson investigated a hospital in the Northern Cape and found that several deaths that took place there were as a result of a lack of care that should have been provided. There is no memorial that has been erected to those who died. So really all that has happened is that the compensation that was ordered by Justice Moseneke has been paid out, but to all intents and other purposes, government has moved on beyond this. Mental health, and I think I speak for the families, is mental health is an epidemic. Mental illness is an epidemic in our country. And if the only thing that was learnt and done arising from this was to improve the quality of care across public mental health care services, then we would have done something and we would have learnt something. But even that hasn't happened. So there's always a danger of another Life Esidimeni happen, perhaps not as grotesque and extreme and callous as preventable, and as what happened at Life Esidimeni, but the risk to patients within the system remains.
Mark, just a very quick one. We basically have ended the interview. Is there another civil claims second wave, perhaps in the pipeline? Not maybe in the pipeline, but could this possibly happen? Because what we are hearing is money's been paid, but accountability's gone. Nothing that has been said should be done has actually been done, and we're in the same situation. Another wave, a civil lawsuit perhaps?
Leanne, I can't speak for the families or for Section 27, but I would say is that Section 27, who have done a fabulous job in representing the families for over 10 years, will do everything that they possibly can to bring relief and peace and justice for the families. At the moment, the focus has to continue to be on making sure that the NPA moves from a recommendation of prosecution around culpable homicide to actually doing that and getting to trial and putting Qedani Mahlangu on trial. That's the most urgent priority and the matters around it. But as I've said, there are many linked issues, including possible civil claims.
Indeed. All right, Mark, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Thank you so much for talking to us about this matter. I wish we were further along down the line, but here we are 10 years later and still having a very similar conversation that we had over these last 10 years. Mark Heywood, an activist and former Section 27 co-founder, speaking about the NPA considering the prosecution of 2 top officials linked to the Life Esidimeni tragedy.